Our topic of discussion for today will be the change in language and attitudes about gender, gender roles, and sexuality.
Mostly focusing on how it has changed over time in comics and video games.
First, let's define what gender and gender identity are.
We believe a transition to more of an acceptance of gender identities and language has developed in digital medias.
Yes, and this can be seen within comics and video games, which is what we'll be focusing on today. In the past, women were depicted with wearing very skimpy clothing that sexualized their bodies.
These costumes and women were depicted in this way to be pleasurable for men and was normal for the expectations placed on women.
This is an example of the sexualized costumes of the past. This is Ms. Marvel from the 1990s.
Notice how the costumes were rather skimpy. They barely cover the female body. Ms. Marvel is depicted as busty, blonde, and gorgeous.
This can show how sexualized the female body has been during the past when regarding literature like comic books.
But as time has passed, we can see a change in these costumes and the way women are portrayed in comic book literature.
This is a modern Ms. Marvel, or Kamala Khan, from year 2013. She lives in Jersey City and grew up in a Muslim household but attends a public school. When she earns superpowers that allow her to shrink or grow, her desires to become more normal, like her friends, become even more complicated.
The modern Ms. Marvel is a good example of this change. Her costume is covering her body and has practical uses as well.
There is a great respect for Kamala's ethnicity and religious background throughout her story, which centers around her trying to juggle a normal life as a teenager and a secret life as a superhero.
She portrays female superheroes in a modern way compared to her predecessors and other heroines.
Here is the 90s Ms. Marvel next to the 2013 Ms. Marvel. You can see the drastic changes that the character has gone through.
You can see the drastic changes in costumes from the 90s to 2013.
This shows the change in focus of women characters in comic literature from being objects to sexualized to actual contributing characters.
This change in view of female characters in these comics can show the changing opinions of women within our society as well.
Now let's talk more about the tech world, video games. Here's an example of the game Tomb Raider from 1996.
Notice how the character looks. She's wearing tight clothing, short shorts, and has large breasts.
This is the same game, Tomb Raider, from the year 2015, which is around the same time as when the new Ms. Marvel appeared.
As you can see, there's a huge difference in the 1996 version of Tomb Raider and the 2015 version.
The costume for the newer Tomb Raider focuses on aspects of practicality within the game versus the emphasis of the female body. Here's a progression of the character, Lara Croft, from 1996 to the present.
The interesting thing about this video game is that there seems to be a positive change in her costume, but then it digresses from this path.
It seems as though the character goes through periods of less revealing outfits and more realistic body image, back to the typical skimpy costume and overly emphasized curves.
It seems as though progress is made and then lost. However, at the present time, you can see the character wears a practical costume as well as a less sexualized body type.
Another interesting thing to note is the improvement in the graphics of this particular video game.
In the 90s, video games were 3D but still very pixelated and blocky, which you can see in the different side profiles of Lara Croft's face. The character and camera movements are still jerky and narrowly focused on the character too.
Moving into the 2000s, the characters and background take on a more realistic look. The characters and camera movements become more fluid and realistic as well. A focus on smaller details can be seen.
Through the examples in older and modern generations of comic books and video games, we hope you're able to see the changes in gender and tech.
Especially how the view of women has changed in this type of literature in comparison to the change in media and technology, in a positive way.
These examples, especially modern Ms. Marvel, can show the acceptance of gender identity through the incorporation of gay characters as well.
This shows a positive movement within media, a transition into the acceptance of how people identify themselves and the uprising of equality in gender.
And the improvements in graphics of video games shows the advancement of digital technologies used.
With that, we would like to thank you for tuning in to watch this video and hope we were able to learn about gender in tech.